Venezuela Coalition welcomes everybody here and thanks you for coming. We are showing, and we showed the international travelers passing through this airport, that it's a total lie that Miami is a solid block of reactionary support for the policies of economic warfare that are carried out by the U.S. government against the peoples of Venezuela and Cuba. And we're doing the political work here of reaching out to the thousands of immigrant workers at this airport, urging them to see that their fights for better working conditions and unions is necessarily tied to our fight against the war policies of this government. The war policies of this government are also a war against the rights and gains of working people at home. Our coalition began about 8 months ago as the first attempts by Washington to stage a coup against the elected government of Nicolas Maduro got underway. Those attempts, as we know, fizzled in the complete disaster of self-proclaimed President Juan Guaido's efforts to provoke a division in the Venezuelan military with his Trojan horse of weaponized humanitarian aid on February 23rd. Since that time until early August, it seemed that Washington was kind of licking its wounds and trying to figure out how to relaunch its campaign against Venezuela. Guaido has become increasingly isolated. His supporters have become demoralized and dwindled visibly in size. Many of his aides and henchmen have been indicted or exposed for disgusting levels of personal corruption. When Guaido called for street demonstrations 2 weeks ago in Caracas, the results were just pathetic. His puppeteers in Washington have now begun to back-channel talks with the Venezuelan government without his even being involved. And they have told him that even if the opposition negotiates a deal for some kind of upcoming election as part of the Norway peace talks, that they wouldn't even allow him to run in the election. So confronted with the failed results of their previous efforts, it's clear that Washington has recently decided to make yet another attempt to bring the people of Venezuela to their knees. On August 5th, Donald Trump declared a complete economic blockade. Any country that trades with Venezuela will now face the sabotaging power of the US dollar on their economy. The cruelty and purpose of this announcement was made very clear 2 days later when a ship carrying 25,000 tons of soy protein animal feed for Venezuela was seized in the Panama Canal. We know that some 40,000 people have already died as a result of the sanctions imposed first by President Obama and then by President Trump. We have all been hearing about the horrifying death toll that's mounting every hour in the Bahamas last week as a result of Hurricane Dorian. Let us consider that the unnecessary deaths of 40,000 people in Venezuela are almost twice as many people as the total number of deaths in the United States from the 5 deadliest hurricanes in our history, and this in the space of 2 or 3 years. The stepped-up economic warfare was accompanied by the calling of an international conference in Lima, Peru, that was intended to further isolate Venezuela internationally. The U.S. also sanctioned its sanctions and restrictions on Venezuela's staunchest ally, Cuba. Venezuela and Cuba have cooperated in medical, educational, and other programs that have made a huge difference in both nations. Cuban doctors have literally restored the eyesight of millions of people in Venezuela and provided medical services in neighborhoods where the doctors would never dream of going before the time of Chavez. Massive literacy campaigns have brought the prerequisite of reading to the politicizing fighting people of Venezuela. And in exchange, Venezuelan oil has helped Cuba produce its way out of the difficult special period that began after the collapse of the Soviet Union. This kind of solidarity between nations who want to use what wealth and abilities they have to improve the lives of workers and farmers is the exact opposite of the charity and hypocritical hand-wringing that our media and politicians promote as the only way we can help the poor, suffering people of the Bahamas or Central America. The fighting people of Venezuela and Cuba do not ask for charity. They ask for solidarity, just as they give solidarity. And that link between Cuba and Venezuela is the one that the U.S. government is trying to smash. Its weapons are not better ideas or a better system, nor those of peace and cooperation. It does not want to compete with Cuba in sending internationalist medical teams like the 60 doctors and teachers already in the Grand Bahama and Abaco in the Bahamas. It competes with economic warfare, military provocation, and lies aimed at getting us to support policies that go against our own interests. In that process, it is attacking the democratic rights of U.S. citizens, both Cuban and non-Cuban, to travel freely to Cuba and to send money to their families in Cuba. In these cruel ways, they are actually expanding the base of people to whom we can bring our message. These forms of economic warfare also ratchet up tension with powers like Russia and China. In the last 2 weeks, Washington has also implemented steps to increase military tensions on the border between Colombia and Venezuela. The State Department has set up a Venezuelan Affairs Unit inside the U.S. Embassy in Bogota. Venezuela has announced it has evidence that the rightist Duque government in Colombia is now planning a military provocation along the border that it will use to try and isolate Venezuela at the United Nations. Washington currently maintains 7 military bases in Colombia that no doubt bolster this whole operation. President Maduro has responded that his country wants the violence inside Colombia to stay inside the borders of Colombia. He has called an orange alert in the border zones and mobilized Venezuela's military forces to contain any provocations. This new package of measures designed to force the destruction of the Venezuelan government and the social gains of its people is what made it urgent for us to call this protest that we are having today. We urge you to join us in this work. Right now, the Trump administration is enjoying virtually complete bipartisan support from Congress for its policies. We need to create a movement of truth tellers and truth mobilizers to begin to break up this shameful consensus. We need to make the call for U.S. hands off Venezuela and Cuba louder and louder. We plan more demonstrations. We plan more educational meetings and speaking tours, better information on our Facebook page. We need your support to make this happen. So please make sure that if you're not already on our mailing list, you sign up on it today. Take out your Sharpies. Let's draw an unbreakable line on the map around Venezuela's right to self-determination and social progress.
1, 2, 3, 4.
We don't want another war.
1, 2, 3, 4.
We don't want